So this is my balcony at the apartment I prayed to God to have, and I've been living in it for 4 years. As you can see in the background, those are apartment complexes, and this is my neighborhood. I asked God for three things when I prayed for an apartment, and the first one was a private entry, a balcony, and a washer and dryer hookup. And to my surprise, when I moved into my apartment, all three were present. And it was interesting because I hadn't seen my apartment before I moved into it. So the first day I moved into my apartment was the first day that I saw it. And all these things I asked for, God had for me. And I was so grateful. But there was one thing I didn't ask God for that I found myself having to deal with. And that was my neighbor. Whew. My neighbor was someone I could not stand. And usually I'm a pretty easygoing person. I get along with a lot of people, but this neighbor, not so much. I found myself having PTSD because my neighbor would get into fights with their spouse that would turn into screaming matches and banging noises that just reminded me of my childhood, that brought a lot of fear to my life. So I was dealing with things in my heart and things in my life from my childhood that I never thought would come up for me through my neighbor downstairs. They would be up early in the morning till 2 a.m. when I had to go to work at 6 or go to school, go to college, and multiple things like that. I found myself banging on the walls and stomping on the floors and screaming through the floorboards. And at the end of those episodes, I would cry, like, what is going on? This is not who I am. I just could not stand my neighbor. And the scripture would come to my mind, like, love thy neighbor as yourself. And I'd be like, God, like, what? I can't even fathom loving this person downstairs like I love myself. God, please help me. And I found myself crying out to God almost every week of my life concerning my neighbors. Well, a couple of years ago, I worked at a specific, job. And at this job, there was this janitor that worked there, and we hit it off. I love this guy. He was like a little brother to me. We just talked for so long after, our job was over. We shared about our lives. He had kids and a girlfriend, and we would talk about them, and I would talk about my sisters and my family. We prayed together. He was just such an amazing guy, and I haven't seen him in years until this past week. So I pull up to my apartment and park in my parking spot, and I look over at the car next to me, and it's the janitor that I used to work with a couple years back. I'm like shocked to see him, and I look over and I say his name, like, what are you doing here? And he says, oh, well, this is my brother's apartment. And I look at him, my eyes wide, and I say, which apartment does he live in? And he pointed to the annoying neighbor door. And I looked super surprised. And as I began to speak to him, the door to his brother's home opens, and his brother comes out and he sees me. We don't really talk, and when we do see each other, we give a smile and a wave, but really there's a lot going on there for us. And I look at his brother and I say, wow, I didn't know this was your brother. I used to work with him a couple years back. Like, this is a really good man. I said that to my neighbor about his brother. And my neighbor says, I know, like, that's my brother. I love him. In this moment, they got into the car and they drove off, and I sat in my car for a little longer, and I just began to speak to God. I was amazed that someone that was so annoying and such a burden to my life was connected to someone that I really connected with and that I really loved and cherished at my old job. And in that moment, I asked God to please help me to love my neighbor. because he was connected to someone that I loved. And it made me see him in a different light. I have to say, honestly, in this last 6 months, our relationship has been a little better. He broke it off with that girlfriend, from what I can hear. There's no more fighting. He's not loud and obnoxious, and maybe it's because I prayed. I'm actually really happy for him. He is having a baby, and that's why his brother was over, because he was at the gender reveal party. And I'm going to go to the store sometime this week and find a little neutral color outfit for the baby and maybe get a pack of diapers and put it by his door. Because a really big part of our lives is loving our neighbors as ourselves. And if you find yourself struggling to do that, I encourage you to pray. Pray that God shows you a way to love your neighbor. I feel a lot better coming home now. It's this weird feeling that we have this connection concerning his brother. And I'm looking forward to seeing him and the baby. And also, I'm going to have to look forward to the baby crying. So, yeah, until I move into my own house, this is what I have to deal with. But at least I'm dealing with it in a better light, with a better perspective, with love in my heart that I didn't have before, because my neighbor loves someone and knows someone that I love. So I hope this story encourages you. Looking forward to the next story time. Bye.